The stale air of Sector 7 clung to Elias like a shroud, each breath a conscious effort against the weight of his own thoughts. For years he'd paced the same worn path within the confines of his mind, a prisoner to the incessant chatter of his ego, a meticulously efficient prison guard named Theron. Theron wasn't malicious, not in the traditional sense. He was simply protective, overprotective. Elias had come to realize, to the point of suffocation. Theron had a booming, reassuring voice that echoed through Elias's consciousness. Safety. First, Elias, remember that time you spoke your mind and got laughed at? Or that presentation you stumbled through? I'm here to prevent such calamities. And so, Theron had built walls, brick by invisible brick, around Elias's aspirations, his vulnerabilities, his very joy. Every impulsive desire to try something new, every whisper of creative expression, was met with Theron's unwavering logic. Too risky. What if you fail? What will others think? Elias worked a job he tolerated, lived in an apartment he merely occupied, and socialized with people he barely connected with. All orchestrated by Theron's meticulous fear avoidance strategies. He yearned for something more, a wild, untamed spark he sometimes glimpsed in others. A freedom he felt was eternally beyond his grasp. One particularly monotonous Tuesday. During his lunch break, Elias found himself staring at a stray dandelion pushing through a crack in the pavement. It was a tiny act of rebellion, a vibrant yellow against the gray, and a peculiar thought bloomed in his mind. How did it do that? How did it escape the concrete? That evening, instead of his usual mindless scrolling, Elias picked up an old dust book from his shelf, a gift he'd never opened, The Art of Effortless Living. He flipped it open to a random page, and a sentence leaped out at him. The ego is a tireless guardian, but it can be outsmarted, not fought. I smarted, whispered a flicker of intrigue in his chest. Theron, surprisingly, was silent. Perhaps he hadn't registered the threat. The book spoke of a concept called playfulness, not as a childish pastime, but as a fundamental state of being. It suggested that the ego, ever vigilant against perceived threats, struggles to categorize and control something that lacks serious intent. It was like trying to catch smoke. Elias began to experiment. The next morning, instead of meticulously planning his route to work, he took a spontaneous detour down a street he'd never explored. Theron's voice flared, a panicked siren. Danger, unknown territory, you'll be late. What if you get lost? But Elias, for the first time, didn't argue. He just walked, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. The sun felt warmer. On his face, he noticed the intricate patterns on a wrought iron fence. He wasn't late. He felt lighter. This was his first taste of a trick. He wasn't defying Theron, he was simply bypassing him. The book called it the path of least resistance. He started small. Instead of his usual grim approach to his mundane tasks at work, he started treating them like a game. If he had to write a report, he'd imagine he was a detective piecing together clues. When organizing his desk, he'd pretend he was a highly efficient robot. Theron, initially wary, found himself without a clear target. How do you argue with a game? What was the threat in pretending? The real breakthrough came when Elias decided to pursue an old passion, painting. Years ago, Theron had shut down that dream with a relentless barrage of "you're not good enough. It's a waste of time. Real artists starve." This time, Elias didn't announce his intentions. He didn't set grand goals. He simply bought a small set of watercolors and a cheap pad of paper. In the evenings, he'd put on some music and just play. He didn't try to create masterpieces. He splattered colors, made abstract shapes, sometimes just doodled. Theron would murmur, "What's the point of this? It's not going anywhere." But Elias would simply shrug internally and keep going. There was no goal for Theron to judge, no failure for him to highlight. It was just an act of pure, unadulterated exploration. He discovered the art of gentle curiosity. Instead of pushing against Theron's pronouncements, Elias would simply observe them, like clouds drifting across the sky. When Theron warned, "Don't talk to that person, they might judge you," Elias would acknowledge the thought, then gently, almost imperceptibly, take a small step towards conversation. He wouldn't force it, he'd just be curious. "I wonder what they're like." This subtle shift often caught Theron off guard. Curiosity wasn't a threat, it was just an observation. The more Elias engaged in these small acts of playful experimentation, the more Theron's booming voice began to soften, to fade into a background hum. It was as if the guard, accustomed to grand battles, was disoriented by the sheer lack of resistance. He was a general with no army to fight, a jailer with an inmate who seemed to enjoy his cell, even decorating it with splashes of vibrant color. Elias found himself saying yes to invitations he would have previously declined. He tried a new recipe that failed spectacularly, and instead of shame, he felt a strange, liberating amusement. He shared a clumsy, heartfelt story with a new acquaintance, and instead of judgment, he received a warm smile. One sunny afternoon, as Elias walked through a park, a feeling of immense spaciousness settled within him. He felt the breeze on his skin, heard the laughter of children, saw the vibrant green of the grass with a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. He realized something profound. Theron hadn't disappeared. The ego was still there. A part of him always would be, but its grip had loosened. Its power had diminished. He turned his gaze inward, a gentle smile on his face. "Thank you, Theron," he thought, directly addressing his internal guard. "You tried to keep me safe. But safety isn't always about avoiding perceived threats. Sometimes, true safety lies in the freedom to be, to explore, to simply be." Theron, for the first time, responded not with a warning, but with a quiet, almost bewildered whisper. Elias felt a profound sense of peace. He hadn't fought his prison guard. He had simply tricked him into opening the gates, not through force, but through playfulness, gentle curiosity, and the quiet, persistent whisper of his own authentic self. The stale air of Sector 7 had dissolved, replaced by the fresh, exhilarating breeze of an open sky. Elias was still Elias, but the prison was gone. He was walking free,